Anyway.
Your right hand technique is really well developed. What can you tell us about your right hand plucking approach?
Well, that's the most important thing for fingerstyle bass players, your right hand technique. And the most overlooked aspect of it is having a great spot to anchor your thumb, a great and permanent, well-known spot to have your thumb at all times. So
Home
that,
base, huh?
yes, exactly. All puns intended. And what I do, many, many years, I started off in the Fender bass, which is the basic Fender precision bass pickup position here, these dual split little guys. And I always have my thumb right in here, which dampens now I have it touching the bass and then up against the pickup itself, and then also up against the E string, which dampens the E string. So if you're you're always, your E isn't going to be humming along while you're doing anything.
That cleans up the sound too a bit.
Oh yeah. And when you're playing really loud and everything's feeding back, you got to hang on every string for dear life so it doesn't get out of control. And the other place I put my thumb is right on the next pickup here, which dampens the A string. So when you're nothing else is sounding. Actually, the other part of my thumb is dampening the E string too, so I got them both down. And occasionally I'll even get up to there and put my thumb on the pickup itself for just the G string playing. But the important point is to have a spot for your thumb, whether it be one spot or several spots. I'm just used to that from traveling around over the years. Whenever I do anything, I always have my thumb anchored on the bass. Any like hammer-on stuff on the... Always anchored here. It's actually starting to wear the paint on this bass here. I always have a solid point from which to work, and I keep my wrist locked real solidly. Some instructor was telling some kids the other day to always leave your wrists loose and floating over the instrument. The problem with that is when you're on a 60-foot stage running full blast in front of 20,000 people, the monitors are feeding back, people are throwing stuff. You're going to try to play delicately floating. It ain't going to happen. You know, it's not going to work. You're going to fall on your face, basically. So I really need to lock my arm down on the bass, my thumb in the spot, my wrist locked, and my fingers work. The difference between some players that I see work from this knuckle, where I work from that knuckle there. And the reason for that, you'll see some movement in there, but that's more for positioning. The reason for that is when your finger sweeps like that, it creates a radius about that size.
I see.
And when you sweeps like that, the radius is much smaller. And therefore, that smaller radius fits in between the strings better, so you can actually play one string without hitting every other string while making a sweep. Some players play like that. Stand-up players play like that. You also notice stand-up players have a spot for the thumb. It's on the side of the neck.
Yes. And
that's how they play. I watched a guy the other night playing stand-up bass. He has his thumb locked down there real solidly, and he's got his spot. And on a stand-up bass, there's not too much difference in how any of them are built. It's the bridge thing and the neck and the fingerboard extension over the body, and they're all like that. The problem with electric bass is many manufacturers, everybody makes one different.
Different configurations.
Yeah, so you never got a good spot for your thumb. That's why I make all my basses with this, make sure they got the old Fender style pickups on them, or I can't really ever play them live. You know, even if it's a real cool custom bass, I have to make them put these pickups in it in order for me to play. So in other words, getting back to where we started from, wrist lock, thumb in a good spot, work from this angle, basically, is how I pluck. And there's even a little bit of technology to how the finger goes over the string. As you tighten this joint, your plucking will become harder because you're digging into it harder. Right. Or you can leave it loose and let it float over, like for raking techniques. Like See, when you're raking across, these are sliding across. This joint here is actually pretty loose, and it's just kind of like working its way across. Now, if you want to play harder, you tighten that joint up.
Aha.
So that's like your tension control.
Right. Dynamics control.
Yeah. Dynamic tension, even. Hey, why not do both? But yeah, that's kind of the workings of the joint, how I use it. Now I do a finger exercise sometimes just to make sure I'm really using that part of the joint, which is just try and hold your hand completely still, your fingers completely still, and just work from that joint up one finger at a time without the other ones moving. And it's great at parties too, if you want to do drinking bets and to see
That's
people.
true.
No one can ever do it really. Well, it's actually pretty easy, but then you do twos and different groups of them and whatever. But it's just a good way to exercise your hand, keeping stiff from here to here, totally stiff, and then just working from those joints there. Now you'll see me when I'm playing. Of course, I violate those rules all over the place, but that's basically what it comes from. Is using that joint like that for 3 fingers.
Exactly. Now, your main approach is a 3-finger approach.
Right.
Could you describe some of those details for us?
Well, since most Western music is in 4, to get 4 out of 3, you have to, when you're plucking, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, if you're going to do 4, 1 lands on a different finger each time. Now, there's a little controversy on which way to go when you're plucking. Should you go this way? Some guys want to go back and forth. But if you're sitting at the dentist office and you're nervous, your natural hands are going to fall in that direction. It seems to be that's the natural way that your fingers move. So therefore, that's the natural
law of physics, almost.
Yeah, kind of the law of hand physics, anyway. Whatever book that was in. But that's kind of why I eventually got to that direction. To go in the other direction, sometimes I will for exercise. Anytime I do anything, I'll always exercise it backwards, forward, sideways, do it every conceivable way, even in ways that I normally wouldn't do it, just to exercise my muscles around so I'm not stuck in one particular pattern. So I'm going in this direction. The reason I'm not going back and forth like that is because the middle finger then works twice as much. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It works twice as much on each passage back and forth. Again, that is a good exercise to do, to learn back and forth. But I always tend to go in that direction. So therefore, if you're going to go in that direction with 3 fingers to do 4, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in other words, 1 starts on a different finger each time.
Exactly, it's alternation.
So exactly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I start always, incidentally, with my ring finger. Some guys, I guess if you're going the other way, you would start with your index finger.
Would that be considered your heaviest attack finger?
Yeah. I guess I would consider it that way. But so when I start with that finger, that's 1, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now the next finger, the middle finger, begins 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that ends you up perfectly for your index finger to take the next one, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's... So when you're getting real fast and stuff, you will hear 3 in there if you listen closely. But when I get my live calluses and stuff back, you probably won't. It would be so loud you can't tell anyway. But that's kind of the trick of playing fast with 3. Now you can do with a lot of 2-finger techniques out there. Jeff Berlin plays 2-finger technique, unbelievable. I mean, the last thing he needs is another finger. So, but with a 3, for me, it tends to be easier. Iron Maiden, that galloping kind of thing for heavy metal style stuff. It works good for that, because that's all in 3s or groups of 3s. But some guys don't need it. But for me, I prefer the 3-finger technique. So, but there is plenty of valid 2 fingers that use. And when I do use 2 fingers, I usually use these 2 because
index and ring.
Yeah, because these 2 are actually the most even of the 2 or of the 5 here. Left a few out. And that's one thing I left out also. When you work from that joint, you even up the flatness. See, when you have your fingers like this finger sticks way out. As soon as you change them, you get a totally flat surface there, and it makes it easier so that one doesn't stick out over the other.
Right.
So it's funny because of all this stuff, you'd think, I've spent years figuring this out and then did it, but in actual fact, I did it for years without having a clue as to what it was. So it all kind of developed totally natural by what felt natural to me to play, what actually felt right when I was up on stage, when I wasn't thinking about what my fingers were doing is the last thing you would ever think about on stage. But it all came about from just playing over years and years and years. And then later on, like when I go now, like to Musicians Institute, and somebody asks me a question, I got to stop and think, and gee, how do I do that? So I've learned all this stuff after the fact, in other words. So the reason why I brought that up, I don't want you to think that I was figuring all this stuff out and then applying it, because I'm certainly nowhere near that smart. So
it came through practice, actual live experience.
Yeah, live. Practicing that I've done usually doesn't have too much to do with anything other than finger exercises. Mm-hmm. Live playing is where I've learned all my hammering techniques and everything. They're all thought up and done right on stage live, which is kind of the best place, trial by fire, more or less. So, yeah, that's about it for the right hand, I think. Oh, sometimes I use 4 fingers, but that little finger never gets a quite good enough callus on it, so it catches. So you'll hear it in there.